Hi there, and welcome to our fourth episode in this series on how to build a roadbook. Today, we're going to get into the nuts and bolts of actually building the roadbook. We're going to use a couple of tools. Primarily, we're going to use this one tool that you see behind the screen here. It's called Tulip. You can find a link to it. It's a free tool. In the description below, you can find a link to it. But I also use Google Earth. Let me reduce my picture size here so you don't have to stare at me. We also have Google Earth here, which I use because you get this 3D view, and we used this clip here before when we were talking with Jimmy. But you can actually use this for scoping out some details of a route when you're really trying to figure something out. So let's start with Tulip. What I'm going to do, first thing we're going to do is we're going to build a really simple road book out at a riding area that's near where I live. Next to the Utah Test and Training Range, which is an area where they do active bombing. So you definitely don't want to go past the fence line. This is Tulip. When you install it and bring it up, this is the product that, this is a screen that shows. A couple of things. You have your controls for zooming in on the map. You have different map versions, so you can just do a satellite, you can just do a road map, you can do a train map, but I usually leave it in the hybrid. What that does is puts up the satellite view, but also overlays the Google roads. So if there's any roads in the area that you're putting a road book together, they'll highlight, and I'll show you why that's important a little bit later. The other thing is when you're zooming on this, the Google controls, you have to hit control with the scroll wheel. So if you just scroll wheel without control, it doesn't work. So you have to hit control. Over here on the right, you have your typical save button there. This down arrow actually shows you the road book that you've already built because parts of this get auto built. Then you have a menu over here. This pulls up the menu. New road book opens an old road book. You can import GPX. We talked about that with Jimmy, and we'll later kind of show how that works. Export it, and then you can export the PDF of your road book. And there's actually a kind of a universal format for GPX that this exports also. So we can kind of hide that. So let's go to this riding area and let's start laying something out. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to just start in this parking lot. And what you do is you can left click. You'll figure this out. So what it's done here is it actually used a starting point that I had clicked earlier. Let me get over here and delete this. So we'll use the technique for deleting. Don't know why it chose this point. And there are a few bugs in this. It's shareware, freeware, so sometimes some things will work funnily, and sometimes you have to just exit out and start back up again. So the fact that you're using software that someone built just for the pure joy of it, yeah, there are some small issues that you have to work around sometimes. But what you do is you just go to this point and you right click on it, double right click, and that makes it go away. So if you want to eliminate a point, you just right click. So we're scrolling back over. I'm going to zoom in. Let's scroll back over here to this parking lot where we have a point. So a couple of things to note. When you create a new point, it's this gray color. And then with my left click, I can create some other ones. But if you double left click on it, it goes this kind of orange red. What that does is that actually creates a point in this road book. So you'll see we have our 0 point here and our 0.4. And if we go over here and add one more point on the road, you'll see how it automatically made that right-hand turn at the 0.4 kilometers. So this is in kilometers. So we're going to do a couple of things. One thing is we're going to start by just going down the road in our road book. So what you do is what this makes it nice is if we're kind of zooming out here a little bit, and I go down to this road, and I left click on the road. Oh, sorry, I right click to get rid of that. If I right click on the road, it asks me, do you want to auto trace your routes? Or it's about to. Are you sure? And you click OK, and it automatically snaps on the road. So let's actually go down here a little bit further and do the same thing. Right click on it. Are you sure? Yes, continues on. And I'm actually going to eliminate that point. Then what we'll do, this is going to be a simple road book. We're going to hop off the road. So I'm left clicking over here, and we're going to go through, there's some sand, and what we're going to do is we're going to zoom in over here. And if you look, there's this, see this main route here? We're going to create a road book. We're going to go through the sand. Then we're going to, we'll talk about this later. We'll go take a 90-degree left turn into the sand. And then what we're going to do is we're going to trace. So when you lay down the points, that's how you get an accurate distance representation. So when this is all pretty straight, you can actually connect long things together and even put dots in the middle. But if it curves a lot, actually let's do that. Let's take a left here on this one. So we're just using Google Maps for this now. We'll take a right here. That's sort of straight. We'll come over here, and then we'll come back to the parking area. So we've laid out our general route. One of the rules, the conventional rules that you learn when you start looking into this more is that, learning more about road books, is that the typical approach is that when you're on a main route, you do not leave that main route unless the road book tells you to. So you may encounter some changes. It may be a while between when you have an instruction. But what you do is if the road, you keep going on what looks like the main route until you're told to do something else. So sometimes in a road book, you will add a note so people kind of know that they're on the right route. So let's go right here. And we're going to say passing, there's some sand over here. I think there's even a parking lot. In fact, there is a parking lot because right here, we're actually going to remove this. There's an exit from this road. You can't see it, but I know it's there. There's an exit from the road, and there's like a parking lot with a toilet here. So we will note on the road book that they'll be passing an exit for a parking lot. And then down here, we want to, pardon me, we want to exit the road. In fact, what we're going to do is we're going to see this route here, we're going to have them exit on that 2-track. We're going to have them follow that till we get here. Okay, and then we're going to have them head straight up through these sand dunes. So we're going to, in fact, I'm going to eliminate this. I right-clicked it and see if it eliminated that. It sort of rubber banded the two together. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to make this one giant HP section. We'll talk about that later, but essentially it's not a route to follow. They're just going to try to do rote navigation there. So what we're going to want is we definitely want a point here where they're taking a right, and we're going to have a cap heading. We'll talk about that. And then what we'll do is we'll move this up here. We'll actually have them do a 90-degree or so. So we'll make that a waypoint, and then they'll come out here to this trail, follow the trail, and get back to the starting point. So we're going to need a right turn on that trail. We're going to zoom in on this because if you notice, it's a sort of a main trail, but there are quite a few intersections. So what we're going to want to do is give people some healthy instructions to make sure that they're on the right route here. See, I'm just kind of cleaning this up as we go. So here it looks like it actually splits to the right and can go straight. So we're gonna put a note there that has them keep heading right on this main trail. Here it looks like there's another split. So you can go this way. We're going to say keep right. And then, of course, here we want them to turn left on this little 2-track, and then right on this bigger trail. And then they're going to take another right here. This looks like a very complicated intersection. See this? We're going to have to give some very good instructions there. Maybe just a cap heading. So we'll see. And then they'll get to the end and we'll put a point at the end. And see, when we pull down our road book, what happens is every place where we added an orange, it added an instruction in our road book. So it tells us our road book is about 8 kilometers. We do everything in kilometers. That's a pretty good convention. And what you'll find out is when you're writing a road book, kilometers are actually better because since there are more kilometers to a mile, you can actually make your the there are more hundreds of a kilometer in a mile. You know, there's whatever 200 kilometers, 200 hundredths of a kilometer in a mile. So anyway, you can be more discrete in your measurements. So kilometers is used as a convention. So when we go over here to the right, let's actually go into our road book. See, these are little edit. They're supposed to be little pencils or pens or something. So you click on this to edit it. You can name your road book. We'll call this Demo 1. And then you hit, it's a little bit counterintuitive, but you hit the red to close, and then, oh, sorry, I hit the wrong thing, Demo 1. Yeah, there it is. You hit the red to close. It might seem that you're actually canceling it, but no, it actually adds your text there. And the same thing here. So it says describe your road book. So let's call this, go over here. Okay, let's do this again. Describe my road book. See that now we've hit one of the here we go, test 1. So sometimes things are a little bit screwy. You play around a little bit and it usually works through it. One other thing that you need to note with this software is there is no undo. And there are some reasons for that. But without going into the reasons, what you need to be doing very often is saving. So since we haven't saved this already, we're going to go to our desktop demo 1 TLP. We'll just call it demo 1, and we're going to save it. So, and then when it's been saved, it goes from blue to gray. Now the one caveat to that is if you add a waypoint. So we changed our road book. We added this, not waypoint, we just added a point. This doesn't go blue. For some reason, it doesn't recognize that something has changed. So if you're doing a lot of messing around in the map, you're going to want to, see here it says shift click to save as. You're going to want to do a shift click and save over top the one that you already have. And so now that point has been added. But if you change anything in the actual road book, so let's do this. See how that went blue? So if we cancel out of this, it went blue and we can save it. And so now that's saved. Obviously we don't want that off the start, so we move that back. So we'll save that again. But and we exit out of this. So what you want to do is you want to edit each one of these instructions. And that's how you're giving the people that are writing this some idea of what they're doing. So one of the things that you usually want to do is you want to tell them where it starts. Starts at parking lot. You could even say facing east to give them a really big hint if you want. Start at, you could say center of parking lot. And you can also put a GPS coordinate. I don't have it here. And that way they know exactly where to start. And sometimes what you can do is you can keep some of the GPS coordinates or the pieces of this secret, because if someone just gets this document and they don't know where to start, it's sort of worthless unless they're able to figure it out. So if you're trying to keep things secret from your friends until the day of or the day before, you can keep the GPS coordinates secret, and even if it's off by a mile or two, unless there's something that's specific in the road book that is easy for them to recognize, they're probably going to have a hard time figuring it out. So that's one little trick to kind of keep things secret. So this is headed east, so you can actually see the cap heading here. Cap is our compass direction, so our cap heading is east. So what we're going to do is I clicked on the instruction, and this is we're at 0. So you have a couple different things. This menu over here allows you to add new roads, and I'll show you how to do that when we get to this turn. But it also helps you describe what the road is that you're entering and exiting on. And you'll get a flavor for this as you start playing around with it. But typically, the people use different conventions for these. I'll tell you, and they're labeled here: off-piste, track, road, main road, divided road. People use these differently. For me, I use this divided road as like a major road or a highway. I use the main road as kind of a main, usually a paved road. I use this wide road as like a graded road. The narrow one is usually like a 2-track. And I use this dotted line as either as both single track and HP. And not everyone does that. Some people rank it differently. And again, you can use it however you want, just so that once your group starts riding it, they'll figure it out. But you want to be the point is you want to have some consistency, because you can use these as clues, and I'll show you why. So I'd actually start this out. I would enter and exit as off-piste. Because I'd say you're in a parking lot. There's actually no trail there. It's just kind of the Wild West. And then we're working on tracks here. So you can switch this to glyphs. And so that's the section in the middle here. We're going to add something. We're going to search for start, and you can add a start icon kind of right here. You can also do the same thing over here. You can insert a glyph. You can do start, and you can say, start in center parking lot center. And cedar, that's good. And when you look at these glyphs, you can go, there's so many different things. So you could, and you can use these, again, you can use some of these glyphs for as different things. Some people use this as a house. There's all sorts of different ways you can start to construct this so that people get an idea of what it is you're trying to communicate. Now, there's all sorts of ways to do this. This is good enough where we have a cap. We definitely want a cap heading off the start. And you'll also see that when we add a start, it adds this bubble on here. We'll talk about that later when we're talking about waypoints. But yeah, it actually creates a start bubble so you know when you're in the starting area if you're using those types of waypoints. And we'll talk about what these bubble options are later as well. So what you want to do is you want to, let's see, if you hit the close button, even though it looks orange, like something bad's happening, that actually just closes that window. Now it's been added to our roadbook. We've got our first instruction. So we go to our second one, and you'll notice it continues on the road type from the input before. And it's saying take a right turn, and actually puts a cap heading. So we're going to edit this instruction, the second instruction. And what we need to do is a couple of things. I'm going to go back to tracks. First of all, this is a big, wide, graded road. So I would consider it this definition of a road. So take a right on this big road. But this just shows that it's like the road takes a right-hand turn. It's actually not communicating well what's going on. So what you'd want to do is you'd want to add as this thick road. Then you can create a road going this direction. And you can manipulate these roads to meet what the picture looks like all you want. But basically, it's an intersection. You could also go to this and add a couple of these, because there's kind of craziness going on the other side. That would definitely help people figure it out, and this would make sense, I think, further on in the road book. But with your first instruction, 4/100ths of a kilometer from the parking lot, I think people are going to figure it out. But for purposes of discussion, let's go ahead and do that. And you can see these 2 tracks headed out. And you can get as descriptive as you want. Typically, you want to try and keep things simple because you don't want people spending a lot of time reading from a safety perspective. So I would probably identify this as right turn. And I would go down here. This allows you to change the font height, and I try to make them as large as possible. If you have the space, make them as large as possible. The other thing that I like to do when people are entering a road like this, which I would consider a main road, you want people to pay attention. So you might insert a caution. I think it comes up as caution on here. Yeah. So it depends on. I typically only define triple alerts, and because I want people to be riding aware anyway, and I think double cautions and single cautions, people have different definitions of those. But to me, everybody has the same definition of a triple caution, and to me that means you could die or go on a helicopter ride. So me, when I'm either going across a main road or turning onto a main road, you want people to stop and look. You don't want them just blowing out into the road. So I'd throw a triple caution on there and probably describe it. Entering main road. So we now have our second instruction, and as we're zooming, you can see that actually adds a huge bubble, and there's a reason for that. I'm actually going to reduce this down to 50 again because we don't. We'll explain this later, but basically, since it's right off the beginning, nobody's going to be going at a healthy pace, so they don't need to be warned way ahead of time. You could actually, I don't think you can go. Yeah, you can go lower here. So I just make this 20 meters. So we're going to save again, and now we've saved our first two parts to the road book. So we're going to, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop this for now, and I think I'm going to build out the rest of this road book and then just come back and explain what I did. I'll be back in a little bit. Okay, we're back after doing some editing on our road book. I think I've got a pretty good first pass here, and I wanted to walk you through this. Hopefully I don't forget everything that I added, but let's zoom out and kind of take a look. You can see I added a few more orange points, but probably not too many more. So let's just walk through this instruction by instruction, and I'll give you some insights. So we did the first one and the second. Again, I adjusted this a little bit, added some of the details, added a cap heading here. So getting out of the parking lot is a pretty easy endeavor. And then we had added this point when we were making this. You're following on the road. It's a main road, so nobody is really going to get off track here. But just as a sort of checkpoint give the riders a little bit of comfort, because it's a mile or so into this. Sorry, my phone just rang. So we're talking about we're highlighting that there's an exit off the main road, but of course the text just says stay on the main road, or you could just say keep straight or something. And we threw some buildings down in there. Just again, you're not trying to duplicate it perfectly. You're just trying to give a hint for someone so they can follow along. Okay, so our road book continues, scrolling on down at kilometer 334. Let's keep going down here. Oops, see, I clicked as I was trying to clean that up, and sometimes you'll get this point. So this added a point actually to the end of the whole road book. So what you want to do is you want to double right click on that, and that deletes that. But it's another one of those things that will happen as you're kind of trying to move around. And you just need to, again, save a lot and make sure you just take your time when you're cleaning this up. So I'm going to zoom into this instruction. One of the things you'll notice is when you bring up the instruction, you can use this green button to orient the map with orient your map with the instruction. So I've done this enough where I can picture it all in my head. I can rotate it kind of in my head, but while you're getting used to that, you may want to use this green button to orient it so you can make sure you're matching things up appropriately. And so now we're actually headed south. I'm sorry, we're headed west here. This is west. So we're turning kind of north. So What you're going to see is I've added some of these roads in here. We added these roads, and so it's a pretty complicated intersection. So it's a right turn, and what I wanted the navigator to do is basically, hey, let's watch the cap heading. So you're going to exit this. You can kind of sometimes these roads are really visible on Google Maps, but when you're out there riding, they're not visible at all. So what we want someone to do is just kind of know, okay, here's the direction they need to go when they leave there. So and when we exit it, it sticks us back into our old orientation. So the other thing you'll notice is here I actually turned off the cap heading because there's no in a lot of cases you don't want to overshare information. The navigators shouldn't be checking all the forms. They should have enough information to kind of give them a clue. And in other cases, you actually leave off the cap heading to make the navigation a little bit more complicated. And I'll show you what we do here at 356. So you exit off the main road, you're onto a smaller road, so it may be hard to tell, but I actually went from a bigger road to a smaller road, essentially a two-track. So you follow on that two-track, and when you get to this part, again, as I said before, the mode is that you want to keep, if you don't have any further instructions, you want to keep on what looks like the main road. But when you're building these things from Google Maps, what looks like this could be the main road, actually when you're out there, who knows, maybe the past few days a lot of people have burned in this corner and it looks like that corner is actually the main route. So adding an instruction to help people keep straight, and there's some complexity here. There's a few different little paths happening. So, just told them to keep straight, but I intentionally took the cap heading off. For a couple of reasons. One is I think it's a nice little area of complexity that I think it's good for someone to not have the reliance on a cap heading. And I really don't think it's necessary there. But then I'm going to show you the trick that I did here. So we get to the end of this road, and you can see this actually goes out to sort of a dry lake bed. And what we want to do is we want them following this curve. It doesn't matter if it's this curve or this curve, and you'll see here. So this is the route. And I'll rotate it so that you can see what we're doing here. Well, let's actually do this. Let's move it more this way so when it rotates, I think it'll make it. No, okay. So I'm not gonna do that. We're gonna exit again. Because you need to see what's going on. The way this program works, and the way some of the other programs work for making these road books, they're all similar. Is they take and they use basically the angle between these two lines to define your cap heading. So if this is the road coming in, the way it goes out is with the cap heading. And when you're building a road book, the typical convention around a cap heading is the compass heading when you complete the tulip. This is called a tulip. So it's not the compass heading right here. It's as you've sort of completed the instruction, what direction are you going? And it would basically mean, what's the direction when I complete this corner here? Now, the challenge is if you mark this like this, which is the way you would normally mark it because you're going to follow the path, the cap heading is going to be incorrect because it's actually going to give you this compass heading. So you sort of need to fudge the program. And you'll see we went from 241 to 304 because this road direction here is 304. So that's a little trick. If you're actually trying to document what the direction is when they complete the turn, sometimes you need to fudge things by adding in a little, and you can do it a number of different ways. You can do it this way, you can do it this way. Obviously, the intent is to sort of keep the same distance, and that's why you do that. So that gives us a cap heading. So this road is 301, and that helps you understand why I did it that way. So there's multiple things going on here. I tried to indicate that. But essentially, you just want someone to follow this main kind of curve. And then we move on to where essentially you're going on a straight road. You're following a cap heading, and it's mostly straight. And then after basically a quarter of a kilometer, we have an HP setting. I'm sorry, an HP direction. An HP, this is French, but essentially it means off the piste. And off the piste means there is no trail. And your job is to try and do what's called, people call it differently, like rote navigation, which just means I am trying to follow a cap heading of 007. So I'm going to leave this path. I'm going to follow this cap heading. And nice part about this region is it's all sand dunes. There's some trails and whoops, but there's no, we're not going to be poaching across any land where you're not allowed to just kind of ride wherever you want, because you don't want to do that. You don't want to tear up pieces of property where it's not okay to just ride across them. But in this case, this is great because this area is intended for just kind of a play area. But you're gonna basically leave this path at a cap heading of 007, and you can see it's a pretty long distance. For most people, 2.5 kilometers. So this is over a mile. It's 1.5 miles of following this cap heading, and you're just going to follow it. And you can see here that there's some more sand, and you're maybe even into the foothills of some of these. So it gets a little bit interesting. We're following it directly, and then you get to this point here, which we have marked as a masked waypoint. So we'll talk about those. I think I'm going to do a whole separate little discussion about waypoints. But essentially, this is if your software that you're using, or your computer, the technology that you're using allows for active waypoints. The Rally Blitz stuff does, and that it sort of makes it fun, because what happens is when you enter this bubble, you'll get an arrow that pops up and helps you point you to the waypoint itself, and then we'll let you know when you've collected it. So you'll know you've made it to the waypoint, and then at the waypoint there's actually more HP, so we're headed to another. So you get to this waypoint, and now you have a cap heading of 280, leaving that waypoint to get to somewhere else. So this is all rote navigation. You can also, if you really want things to be challenging, is you can have a waypoint that doesn't have a bubble. So you can just call it a waypoint, and someone just has to get to where they think they're at the right spot and then make the next navigation. And you chain a few of those together, and things can get quite interesting. But then one of the conventions, one nice thing to do when people are leaving an HP section is to try to actually have them run into a road or something, so that you don't have people just completely lost out in the middle of nowhere. So it's nice to have something to kind of run them into. So let's say they were short on this, or they ended up over here, or they ended up over here. Well, if anybody's kind of navigating generally in the right direction, they're going to take this left-hand turn, and they're going to hit this trail, this road system over here, sort of no matter what. And it's a bit of kind of a safety convention, not a physical safety. Just it helps people, if they've not navigated this perfectly, this HP section, they can still, there's a good chance they're actually going to be able to get back on the track and figure things out. So in this one, you can see I sent people through this HP section, and then we're going to zoom in on this. I noticed that there was a decent little section where there's some trail coming in, there's some trails going north, kind of north-northeast. And so it's actually a nice little point that whoever finds it is going to really recognize that they're there. And I put some bushes in there because there's a few more little scrub bushes here. Said take a right on this 2-track, did put the cap heading, and then gave another instruction, just 5/100ths of a kilometer, because it looks like, depending on the state of these trails, someone might end up just kind of keeping in this direction instead of staying right on the main track. So have people staying right on the main track. It looks like a pretty main thoroughfare, even though there's lots of trail coming across it. It looks like a pretty main track. So we'll see if people could navigate that. They should. And then look here, things get a little bit complicated. I tried to represent that on the Tulip here, at least to represent that it's complicated, and give a cap heading for them so they can say, yeah, I'm still headed in the right direction. And yeah, it could be interesting that some people may end up taking an extreme left here, but hopefully people would be able to navigate that correctly. Then it's interesting, the trail actually goes parallel here, and then I wanted to take a left, but I represented that, again, there's a bit of complexity here, and then defined, well, a left turn and cap on 307. Then a little bit of a two-track. Then there's a nice little intersection here, pretty easy to navigate. Looks like at one point there was a big bush there, so I took the opportunity to throw that bush in there. Then we can go up. We've got a right-hand turn here, but it's another interesting intersection, so I tried to represent that because it's possible someone might get to this point, and if they're not paying attention, might try to make that right-hand turn. So instead, you try to represent this in the tulip, and then I did add a cap heading because there's some complexity there. And then you can see this area looks really crazy. I imagine coming through there, especially how these tracks get burned in with people, out on different rides. You could end up over here. You might end up over here. These things many times look so different, and I think there's a bit of a rise here. You're coming over a rise, so working your way through this doesn't even look like there's a straight line. So, yeah, you can get as creative as you want to in describing this. I just said craziness. Watch the cap heading. And it looks like these two roads sort of come out and they're parallel. So in the end, kind of doesn't matter. And at this point, people are getting so close to the end zone, that I think it just makes sense. You're headed to the finish line, and there you are. So, this is I actually just built this as a demo, but I'm actually going to go ride it, and it looks like this is a nice little training loop. Shouldn't be too difficult riding. There's some complexity with the navigation, and having ridden in this area, I know that some of these areas are going to be confusing. So next thing we're going to do is, I was going to go into some details on waypoints and HP, but I think what I'm going to do is actually just turn this into a next thing. The next segment I'll be talking about turning this into like a printed road book or a digitally printed road book, and then getting it loaded into some Rally Blitz stuff. And we'll go out and take it. We'll go take it for a little loop and see how it rides. And then I'll show you kind of how I manage, how I know how the route works, how I can take some notes. Because what you want to do is you want to build this. If you really want to hand it to so I could hand this to 2 or 3 friends now. We could go ride this and probably have a great time. I know this area. I know that there aren't any safety concerns. There's likely no drop-offs. I know there's no fences, or I'm pretty sure there's no fences on all of this. So I could go hand this to some friends who I'm 95% comfortable that they would be able to get to the end of this, and it would probably work well. But if you want to actually you'd be able to hand it to some people and have them navigate it, and 100% that it's going to work, you need to go ride it. And then take some notes, and you can add some details. So maybe this, maybe when you get to this rise, maybe this really is a rise. Actually, let's pull this up on Google Earth. Let's go find this. Okay. Google Earth sometimes takes a bit to figure out how to navigate. There's the parking lot, and in fact, I have ridden this before, because you can see in an interesting way. So I didn't know that I'd actually ridden this before. So let's pull up. I'm gonna check this out. This is pretty cool. So I'm going to move this over to the side of the screen, because I want to show this point here. So here you can see over on Tulip. Let's make Tulip smaller. Let's try and do this. I'm going to minimize this. Okay, so this here is the area where we had that interesting navigation. And you can see when I rode this once, I came straight across the top. But what it appears is when you get to this point, this crazy point, it appears, for whatever reason, as I was riding through there, It looks like it has a nice little flow. But it really does also appear that this is there's some elevation there. Again, I'm not, let's see here, we gotta zoom in on this. In other words, what I'm saying is when we go and ride this and we get to this point, it's highly likely if this is elevated that you're just going to be able to see the parking lot. And what we might put in the instruction there is look for the parking lot and go. So, it's your road book. You can do whatever you want in order to try and communicate it clearly. And the idea is to, or at least the way that I like to look at this is I want it to be challenging, but I want people to be able to get to the end. So it's not, the intent is not that it's supposed to be like a detective novel where you have to figure it out in a very sophisticated way in order to even have a chance of making it. It's if you're doing a decent amount of job thinking about what the ride is like, and you're not too far down into your road book, you should be able to complete this without too much effort. So the trick is always kind of striking that balance, and I've erred on both directions sometimes, made things too easy, and sometimes I've made road books that were so hard that I had people that I pre-wrote it and wrote it with a friend and it worked. And then when we had multiple people out, we had people lost in the desert all over the place. So it takes practice to figure out kind of what that balance is between complexity and the ability to finish it. So what we're going to do in the next section is I'm going to show you how we're going to turn this into an actual road book. We're going to export this and we're going to pull this into the Rally Blitz applications and we'll go ride it. So we'll see that in the next episode.